Hi, welcome to Generation Wisdom. My name is Alex.
And I'm Tom. And today we're going to discuss one of Jesus's parables from the New Testament. Now, the New Testament is the second canonical text of Christianity, the first being the Old Testament. And this is a section from Luke 15 where Jesus is sitting around breaking bread, discussing life and his teachings with tax collectors and sinners. And the Pharisees, who are very dedicated to the Jewish Old Testament and laws, start to complain about this. And they're very judgmental when they see Jesus breaking bread with these sinners. And Jesus responds to them by telling the parable of the Prodigal Son. So, Alex, why don't you begin by reading the first part?
And he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living. So you want to start with the commentary? Or
Me? No, why don't you?
Okay, sure. So there were 2 basic things that I thought of here. The first being that of the fact that the younger son was taking things for granted. I think that, if you want to look at this as an archetype or as a universal pattern that people see in life, that this is something that's very common. And I feel like, as we're going to see throughout this parable, that both sons tend to have everything being taken care of from their father. And so, this option, this younger son, the fact that he takes everything for granted, it's a common thing that happens. And the other thing that I think you notice is that the father's very compassionate. I think he's wise and he knows that the younger son might take things for granted, but nonetheless, he still is willing to give his wealth to him. And these are my observations. What are yours?
Yeah, I totally agree. The only thing that I would add about this is that I guess it's a theme that a lot of us go through, which is the son travels to a distant land. So I think, again, as Alex said, not only does he not appreciate what he has in life, all of his basic needs seem to be met, but he's also just very bored by the whole thing, and he seeks adventure, or at least what he feels is going to be adventure, and so he goes off to a distant land. That's a common theme in literature, and as Alex mentioned, it's common when discussing various archetypes. And the father doesn't give him any advice. The father doesn't beg him to stay, right? The father is not judgmental at this point and doesn't say, well, you're going to ruin everything and you're going to ruin your life. I think this is, the father is just basically saying, hey, everything I have is yours. And if this is what you want, go for it. So I'll read the next section.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. Pardon me. I mean, I think it goes to saying that, as you said earlier, he doesn't appreciate what he has, but he doesn't learn that until he loses it. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's kind of like, some people have to lose what they have in order to appreciate it. I think that's what we learn here. And then he also, when he struggles is when he learns. And what I find admirable about the son in this parable is that he doesn't feel like he deserves forgiveness. Would you agree?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, I think that's what this says to us, this section.
Yeah, I agree.
Should we move on?
Yeah, we could.
Okay.
So he got up and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fattened calf. Kill it and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. Very mysterious ending. How do you feel about it, Dad?
Yeah. I think that this over the overall theme, and it's on display right here, is about unconditional love and the power of forgiveness. The father doesn't say, "Ha ha! I told you you'd come running back," because first of all, the father didn't say, didn't beg him to leave in the first place. I think he realized he needed to learn this lesson for himself, and no amount of words or begging or discussion from the father was going to teach his son the particular lesson that he needed to learn in this case. And he when the son comes back, he comes back by his own volition, and the father is not judgmental. The father just receives him with love and accepts him back.
Yeah, and I think it's very counterintuitive because you would assume that the father would, in order to be so-called caring, would have to be disciplinary and not give such a great reward or celebration. But it is, weird or just different how the father would be that congratulatory that he came back, because as we'll see later, the next son has a different reaction to what happened. But I think the lesson here to learn, or part of it, is that I guess you can say God, or you can say your parents in general, they love when you actually try to have a relationship with them and you realize your humility before them, rather than just obeying because it's the right thing to do, or being afraid of punishment because it might hurt you. That's the difference between having a genuine relationship with your parents or God, and just doing it because, is it a more transactional kind of thing where it's not really deep.
Yeah, and I think this is a lesson. This is not just a lesson for young people or children. This is a lesson for fathers and mothers as well. I mean, this truly is the way this is what you should strive for as a father. That's why I picked this, particular parable, because obviously Alex and I are father and son. So without getting personal at all about our own lives, we've certainly been through some things like this. I went through it when I was a kid with my parents. This is an age-old situation that all families go through. And I would say, there's almost a resurrection that happens here. He was a lost soul, and that part of him has died, and now he is reborn at this point, where when he says, he has come to life again. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and he has been found. And also I want to point out that, just remember in the previous section that the son had said, declared that he was not worthy to be his son, or maybe it was this one. And the father could have said, hey, you're right, come on back, but I'm now going to treat you differently. I'm going to treat you as one of my servants. So sure, pick up a pitchfork and a shovel, start working the field, and you can eat and sleep like everyone else. He didn't say that. He said, come back as a full-fledged, member of my family. Put the robes on, put sandals on his feet, give him the gold ring. Let's throw a big party and celebrate. He just takes him right back and returns him to the lifestyle that he had previously, without any sort of punishment or judgment. So,
yeah, I agree. So this is the last section. I think it is. Almost.
Is it me now?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing, and he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father, look, for so many years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected a command of yours. And yet you have never given me a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. What do you think?
So when I was reading this, I was thinking, and I kind of alluded to this when we talked about the previous verse, that the older kid was basically looking after moral perfection and not love. He was more concerned about what would happen to him and his own self-image more than he cared about, connecting with his father. And I think that we shouldn't be completely judgmental of this kind of person, because I think we all start out like this. I think St. Paul says in the New Testament that fear is the beginning of wisdom. And we always start out almost as like a lonely individual trying to search for a way for the truth and for justice. And eventually that means we start out as someone who is fearful of the truth or of the good. And so we automatically get into survival mode. We're just trying to take care of ourselves. And I think that's kind of the innocence that this older brother has. And so, it's one way we can look at why he's acting the way he is. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and I agree. I think this is, the ugly side of, jealousy and anger on full display here. The brother just feels like, hey, what about me? I've been the good son this whole time. I've never taken anything for granted. Where's my reward? And again, so it's just interesting because it's not just a lesson for the prodigal son. Prodigal, that word meaning, to spend money frivolously or wastefully. But it's also turns out to be a lesson for, the good son, quote unquote good son, as we're about to find out. Because he has no forgiveness in his heart. And, spiritually, he seems to feel he's more pious than the other son. So let's move on.
Well, there's one. Sorry. There's only one extra thing I'm thinking about that, because you said the word pious, that the older son probably thinks he's more pious. I think that the father is trying to teach a lesson in that piety is not, or being a good person is not about never making mistakes, but about admitting your mistakes and being mature with them. Whereas the previous son, he's just like obsessed with trying to be perfect. And he thinks, it confuses this with piety and goodness, but this is more like cowardice, something that Jordan Peterson might point out. But anyways, that's just one idea.
No, that's cool.
So the last section.
Yep.
It's my turn, right?
Yours.
And he said to him, Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found. Yeah, echoing the two previous verses before.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as you said, the father teaching the son who had stayed with him all along that, of course you're appreciated. Of course I love you. But you need to show your brother your love as well. And you need to not be judgmental. That is the main lesson. And then if I was to move on, like in a, from a more spiritual, godly sense, I experienced this. I took Alex to the Greek Orthodox Church a handful of times. And one time Alex said to me, Dad, there's a lot of pride in being Greek Orthodox. And I think you meant that in a good way, but also in a bad way as well. And I can tell you from experience, as someone who did not go to church, the Greek Orthodox Church, every single Sunday, there was a running joke that my father and I had, that a lot of people had, which is, if you weren't a regular churchgoer, when you stepped into church, you would get dirty looks from the regular churchgoers. Okay? Oh, nice of you to show up. Or if you went and you didn't show up at 8:30 in the morning when the service began, some people would show up later. Again, you would get that look like, hey, thanks for coming in. Too bad you couldn't come in on time. Or if you were a holiday churchgoer, even the priest at that point would not just say, it's so great to see all of you here on such a joyful occasion as this religious holiday. He would also have a little zinger in there that said, too bad the church isn't this full, all day long. And that's unfortunate because, again, going back to piety, I think you have to leave room. Like, everyone is different. Everyone worships, I think, in their own way. And during certain people's lives, it varies. How close and how far away they get to and from God varies. Not everybody hears the word and accepts it right away fully. I've been through this myself. So Alex, how do you feel?
And yeah, even when you do finally hear the word, it takes time to be able to implement it into your life and practice it. And, the Father, unlike some of these unfortunate people in the church my dad described, he's not judgmental. He doesn't try to make people feel guilty. Because even if he realizes that both these sons need to learn different lessons, he doesn't think it could be learned through just judging and through criticizing, or at least directly. Instead, he gives them the space to think about what they've done, but also rewards them according to the level of awareness that they have. Because if he just judged everyone on one universal standard for everything, then they wouldn't receive guidance. They wouldn't be able to be helped. Instead, they would just feel that incredible weight of the judgment on them, and they probably would just go down and not even try to improve at all. And there's another thing I was thinking about that I think part of the lesson of the end of this parable is that it's better to have been lost and found than to remain in a weakened form of security. The older brother,
Amen.
Where they just stay stuck there and didn't even try to improve himself. But when you go out and make that chance to be lost so that you can be found, that's what makes all the difference. And of course, you can say the same thing about, it's better to die to live than to survive in fear. The first son had to go out there and to really risk his life, taking advantage or taking for granted everything his father gave him in order for you to realize what he had in the first place. And I think this is something that we all have to, fortunately and unfortunately, go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to add that, this is a great lesson for those of you who are either parents right now or are future parents, to realize that when you have multiple children, they're going to be different. Without getting into detail, are you and your sister different?
Yes.
Yes, and my brother and I were very different as well. And as a parent, you, as Alex said, you need to be able to give your kids some space to learn on their own. And also, I think the larger theme for me, the reason this is so personal for me, is that I realize that I have the power to forgive, let's say you and your sister, if you do something that I don't approve of, or I have that power of forgiveness. I have a higher level of forgiveness for my children than I do for the average person outside my own family. Now, that's not the way it should be, but intrinsically, that kind of is the way it is for most people. There is absolutely nothing that you or your sister could do that I could not find it in my heart to forgive, because you are my children, because I am the Father. And then when you take that to the religious theme, it was very comforting for me to realize that God himself has the ultimate power of forgiveness, because we are all God's children. And I thought, well, wow, this is fantastic, because, it's not that I can do anything I want and be forgiven, but it's almost like that. It's pretty close. I mean, God has the ultimate power of forgiveness, and I think forgiveness and sin, retribution, resurrection, these are all themes that are central to Christianity.
Yeah, and I agree that this tends to be something that is expressed strictly in like a father-son or mother-daughter relationship, but the family is like a microcosm, like a smaller version of society at large. And so when this kind of relationship between father-son or daughter-mother is inculcated, it improves your ability to be this way, sort of, in other kinds of relationships where there's this kind of, non-judgmental compassion. I think that's probably the essence of a father's attitude,
Yeah, and I love the fact that the older brother who stays with the father learns the lesson. So the prodigal son in this case actually turns out to also be the teacher. There's a line in the Tao Te Ching that always says, when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And that's certainly what happens here, I mean, what comes out of nowhere in this parable is how the older brother also has a lesson to learn. So, yeah. Like I said, I chose this parable purposely because I am a father, father and son. I have a daughter as well. And it was very personal to me.
I'm glad we discussed this.
Yeah, me too. I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much for watching.
Have a nice day.